Thomas Tuchel has announced his England squad for the upcoming games against Wales and Latvia. Jim and Vish are with me to discuss all that good England stuff. Gentlemen, minimal changes to the squad from the previous times against Andorra and Serbia, of course. Bukayo Saka's back from injury, as we expected. But yeah, pretty much bang on. The same squad. Noni Madueke's not there through injury, and Tino Livramento's had to pull out as well. Notable omissions include Phil Foden, Jude, Bellingham, Jack Grealish and Adam Wharton. Immediate thoughts, Jim Campbell?
Yeah, my immediate thoughts are sadness for Jack Grealish because he's had a really brilliant start to the season. He's got 4 assists already. We've all seen how good he's been, and I think this means that Tuchel is very unlikely to consider him as a serious candidate for a squad place next year.
You think it's that drastic for Grealish?
Well, because if he's started about as well as he could do, and it feels to me like this is actually a show of faith in Anthony Gordon from Tuchel, because obviously if Grealish is in, someone else has to come out. Gordon, we haven't quite seen the best of him for England yet, I don't think, but I think we're all agreed at the same time that there is more to come from him. And I think Tuchel is, as I say, is showing faith in that idea rather than thinking he'll throw Jack Grealish a sort of lifeline to his England career. Obviously, that's not how he's going to think about it and not what his priorities will or should be. I do feel that is a little bit of a shame. These races probably run. Who knows? Players get injured, etc., etc., and he might have a brilliant season and force his way back in. But I think we all may be hoping a little bit. We might, the band might get back together.
I think you might be being a bit premature on Jack Grealish there, if I may. But we'll come on to that in a moment. The other player in that position on the left flank would be Marcus Rashford. I know Eberechi Eze can play in numbers, but they're all in. So you have plenty of options on that left side. Vish, what are your immediate musings on this squad?
It's all over.
What, as in we think it's all over? No, is that, or as in we're done for?
We're done for.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm taking actually too much from it, because while I am disappointed on behalf of Jack Grealish, as clearly are Everton Football Club, because they've just retweeted an old post of theirs about how he's created the most chances in the Premier League this season.
Sounded like they'd made him a cake or something, and they were like, congratulations, getting back in there.
Oh no!
Will this keep for the next squad?
How many letters in commiserations? People that get cake for that.
Yeah.
Should we be feeding our players cake at all? When we think about it.
Does he need more sugar? Do you reckon?
Maybe.
Where did he get those balloons from?
Yeah.
I do think that, as with all managers, England or otherwise, there will come a point leading into a major tournament where Tuchel's going to think, if we have one more creative player, what does it matter?
Really?
Do we need 3 goalkeepers? I think when the pressure is on him, we're going to see a lot of those big names you mentioned come back into the fore. I wouldn't be surprised if we see all 3 of them, to be honest. And that spells bad news for the least sexy of those forward players, which, I suppose just going on this squad might be the likes of Ollie Watkins and Jared Bowen. But I also do think that the continuity that we've seen over these 2 squads pertains to Tuchel's strengths, which is club management, and he's wanted to create that club feel. He's been quite open about that since taking the job, that he wants to make it more like a club, which is everyone's aim. But the thing I would say is I think Southgate probably nailed it, because there was a bit more of an appreciation of the international feel for it. The Bellingham thing, which we're going to come on to, is really interesting, because I think by and large, beyond like that quote, which we don't need to go over again, from a few months back, he's played it quite well. I think he's been quite open about the fact that Jude Bellingham's a superstar and superstars get treated differently. But yeah, by and large, kind of broadly unmoved and not too downhearted by this squad.
Well, let's talk about some of the quotes then that Tuchel said in his press conference today. He said, why not bring the same squad in from the last international break? They set the standard. And I think we were all buzzing after that Serbia game. I understand that it's a team that England probably should be beating, and they beat them very handedly. It's just one game.
It was a very professional performance, wasn't it?
But it was. And you saw something, because you got very limited games to go on with international football. I don't know that's the same for everybody, but we saw something and people were buzzing after the game. Thought, oh, okay. And he's obviously trying to channel that and feed into that. On Jude Bellingham specifically, who is one of the biggest omissions, of course, he's back playing for Real Madrid. Tuchel was asked about this. Now, you mentioned Gareth Southgate there. I agree with you, and with
Of
regards,
course you do.
Yeah, well, I'm a fan of the man. But one thing, though, that you could argue that Southgate sort of succumbed to eventually, certainly in his last tournament, was trying to fit maybe one or two big players in and didn't make a couple of calls. Now, I know Phil Foden played on the left for Man City, and I thought it was worth a go, but that dynamic with him and Tribute, whatever,
it didn't quite work.
It didn't quite work, did it? Yeah. And so he got the allegations, like a lot of England managers have had in the past, of you're just trying to crowbar all the best players in. And with Tuchel, one of the hopes is that, he's not here for a long time. He's here for a winning time. And so therefore shouldn't really give a damn. His kind of shtick as a manager is no nonsense. This is my team, up yours, English media kind of thing. And I think people...
Even to his players, we don't need to be mates.
Yeah, fine. Yeah. Whatever it is, exactly. So when he was asked about Bellingham, he was pressed by the journalist in the presser. He said, it wasn't an awkward conversation. It's straightforward. I explain my reasons, and that's that. It's part of the job. The players have to accept it. Jude is a very special player. For special players, there can always be special rules. For this camp, we decided to invite the same team. That applies to Jude. He always deserves to be in the camp, clearly talking of Bellingham, what he can bring and what he can do. But then he said his situation has not gathered full rhythm. So he's saying that he's not up to speed, which is understandable. And he knows what Bellingham brings. He's worked with Bellingham. He's been in camps before under Tuchel. So I don't think there's too much of an issue there. He went on to say that there is no problem between me and Phil Foden or Jack Grealish. Phil is back deciding games for Man City, and Jack is a very special player. Don't want to get bogged down into the actual language per se, but did use that word special for Grealish, which is why I think that...
He's keeping the door ajar.
He's keeping the door ajar. With these three players, Bellingham, who he's worked with, Foden and Grealish, there's enough of a sample size to know what they can bring, what type of players they are, what type of characters they are in squads, because they've been there. Grealish, of course, was not there in the last Euros. Some of the more senior players, including Harry Kane, took Gareth Southgate's son and said, are you sure about this? That's how much they rate him and like having him around the camp and what he can bring. So I don't think the door is shut for any of these players, or specifically Grealish. There's a fierce competition, though. And I think that's why Tuchel... What does Marcus Rashford, who's obviously playing Champions League football now at Barcelona, what can he bring to the side? I think that is more of a question mark than, say, maybe Grealish, for example. And so that's why maybe he's giving one or two of these players a go. And also on merit, again, he was a part of that camp. It obviously went very, very well on and off the pitch. So he's thinking, okay, I want to have a really good look at everybody, because he knows what the others can bring. The other quote that I thought was quite interesting was, what if a player like Jude is injured before the World Cup? We have to find solutions if players are injured, like now with Cole Palmer. Mentioning another big hitter who's not in the England squad, but for injury reasons. We found solutions in the last camp. This is more about the last camp and what we started to build, rather than a dependency on individual players. It can never be the solution to depend on one player in football. And that, I think, for some England fans will be music to their ears.
Yeah, especially, I think Jude Bellingham would be in this squad had he played more than the 4 games he's played this season. Yes. And this is an opportunity to look at a player who's already played a ton of games in his career, will have a very long season, and it's also probably the sensible thing to not load him with these games at the moment, because he is one of those players where, barring a significant injury, he will absolutely be in that squad, and he will almost certainly be on the team sheet. So I think it does make sense to have this continuity and look at what the other options are there. Again, Cole Palmer missing is another one. Like, Morgan Rogers started against Serbia in the position that you would have probably had either of those players in, and did really, really well. So it's a funny one, isn't it? Because the absence of Bellingham in particular probably makes your plan B irrelevant, ideally, but it is important to see what else you have. I guess the worry is that a good unit gels without him, and then he comes back in and it disrupts it, and it doesn't quite work in the same way. But such is the nature of international football, right? Where you're always trying to sort of manage these myriad situations with a very small amount of time.
Yeah, and look, we've seen some international teams, players get called up last minute and go into a tournament and then do pretty well, who haven't been around the place. So this idea that, if Bellingham and Foden and Palmer or whoever in the next squad, everyone's going to be going, who are these guys? We can't play with them. I don't understand how it goes. So you don't want to be too silly. And on often in international tournaments, teams find solutions, or they find different options or things that click in the tournament, so we don't want to be too hung up about this.
And sometimes they don't.
And more often they don't. Exactly, Jim. You're spot on there. I mean, I kind of look at this and think, okay, I think that when say Morgan Rogers puts a decent performance in away in Serbia, I feel it would maybe be a touch harsh to say, right, well, sorry, mate, you're great, but we're going to bring some of the big hitters back in and who play in your position, or maybe
it shouldn't matter if it feels harsh though,
because you have to remember Latvia is a game England will be heavy favourite for, and Wales is a friendly. So I think we're seeing Tuchel experimenting. I think that the chat before he came was every squad really matters. And yes, it does to an extent. But when you're looking at these established players, you know what they bring. You know what they're about. They have the experience. You don't have to worry about them so much.
Do you think that's necessarily true though? Because, teams get better by playing together, even if they know each other from playing against each other. I think surely there is an argument that you want the team that you expect to be starting to play as many games together as possible.
Possibly. I mean, you can over-experiment too much, but I mean, who's going to start for England? Saka, Kane, Rice, in goal, Henderson, Stones. They've all played with Foden and Grealish and Bellingham. The one player for me, though, Vish,
Pickford, surely in goal.
Pickford.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes. Sorry.
Saving you from the YouTube comments.
Thank you very
there.
much. Slip of the tongue there. And I'm a big fan of Pickford. Can't believe I did that. The one player, though, that I am a bit disappointed, because again, we can rationalise that and talk about that. I'm disappointed Adam Wharton's not in there.
Yeah, massively.
Vish. I know that Elliot Anderson, again, on the terms of people being picked on merit and good performances, absolutely Anderson should be in there. Tuchel has therefore mentioned Bellingham, Foden and Grealish there. He briefly mentioned Adam Wharton, saying that he deserves to be with us, but that was about it. But for me, Wharton is a player I'd love to see him in there, because he does not have the profile of those players, and he hasn't had the international experience as those other three. To me, I'm disappointed Adam Wharton's not in there.
Yeah, I don't know who he'd come in for, though.
Loftus-Cheek, surely. I mean, I know Loftus-Cheek has done well to be called up, and obviously Tuchel has liked what he's seen from him. But for me, Anderson and Wharton are two really different options as the third player in that midfield, who I think both bring a lot that could be really beneficial to England. And, no disrespect to Loftus-Cheek, but you can't have him in that bracket, surely.
No, I don't. But I suppose Tuchel picked Loftus-Cheek as a utility player.
Mm-hmm. Which I wasn't hugely against.
No.
The man in there who people will still scrutinise is Jordan Henderson.
Yeah, although Henderson's been playing pretty well.
And also, he's made his, whether you agree with it or not, he's saying that he's almost like, well, not almost, he is a leader among those players and an older head, and he clearly values that.
Yeah.
Whether you agree with that or not, Tuchel has said he values that.
I also wonder with Wharton, and it's not too dissimilar to Bellingham, I suppose we don't really know this because I don't think he's been asked about it. Thomas Tuchel's been asked about it. But we've seen it with other international managers where if players come back from injury, they resist the temptation to call them back in straight away because they don't want to overload them with games.
Yeah, that could be a point as
and
well.
Considering Wharton's issue with his groin, the fact that he dealt with it all last year, had an operation, had a slight recurrence as well earlier, maybe about last month. Maybe that's why he hasn't picked him in this squad, because there's no need to burden him with those 2 games, as you said. But I don't really know. I think you mentioned about the squad. These are probably the least important squads that he's gonna pick. The squad he's gonna pick. There's one, the most important one, which comes next summer. Probably this one in terms of like a bit of consistency, but one of those games is a friendly, as you mentioned. And also, we are in the midst of so many games now that I don't think a bit of time off for them is particularly important. I'm going to reiterate what I said around the time of the last squad. I don't know that Harry Kane needs to be playing these games. We know what he brings. We know what he does. It would be nice to see him rested. You mentioned before about the teams working stuff out during competitions. The thing that Southgate worked out during the last Euros, which we were glad for, was that Kane was knackered. And that he shouldn't necessarily play, play the whole game, that he got to a stage where he was actually detrimental to a lot of what England was trying to do in that tournament. Maybe he could have rested him. It's not like, it's not like he's struggling for game time or even goals at the moment. He's well, to my mind, probably one of the best players in the world at this moment in time. So
Yeah.
wouldn't be a bad thing if we rested him, but yeah.
But I think giving Ollie Watkins a chance, I think to use Tuchel's own quotes, he's saying that we can't just rely on one player. What if somebody gets injured? And Kane is, absolutely one who England wouldn't want to get injured. And as you mentioned in the Euros, he was injured a little bit. So Ollie Watkins, to me, has to start one of those games. He's obviously going to play with Kane in at least one of those games. Why else would you bring him to the camp? Also, I suppose if you want to bring in other players, Kane is going to, all being well, Kane is the first name or one of the first names on that team sheet. So you want to be able to figure out how to play with him, if you see what I mean. But I think it would be important for Watkins to get some minutes. But we shall see, gentlemen. Can Thomas Tuchel continue the good feeling at England as he got last time out against Serbia? We shall have to wait and see.